Assalamu alaikum, hello and welcome to The Health Show, here only on the Islam channel with me, Alistair Greener. Every week, as you know, we're joined by a health expert within their specialised field, and we discuss the prevention of health issues or concerns that we or our loved ones may face. Looking at how you can change your health and lifestyle for the better, The Health Show offers an alternative viewpoint from our health experts who attend the show to help guide you in the right direction. And if you'd like any further information on our programme or any of the topics that we discuss, then please do get in touch at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. That's healthshow@islamchannel.tv, and we'll give you that address again at the end of the show. Today, we're going to be talking about counselling, and I'm pleased to welcome Ayesha Alsam and Safiya Khan. Ayesha Alsam is the director of Sakoon and runs a Muslim counselling service that caters for the Muslim community, but it also incorporates mainstream therapy ideas. The service helps in areas such as depression, marriage counselling, as well as abuse and family conflicts. Joining her in the studio is Safiya Khan, who's currently undergoing training at Sakoon. Safiya is a mother of three who took a break from her career, and as she was looking to go back to work, she wanted to do something rewarding that would benefit the community in some way. She looked into counselling, and when she came across Sakoon's course, it appealed to her because it taught mainstream counselling models with an Islamic perspective. Ladies, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
It's great to talk to you, and we've got a lot to get through today, so I'm really excited to get on with our discussion. But before we do that, let's have a little look at Sakoon Islamic Counselling Services, which have offices in London, Birmingham and Manchester. They provide a confidential counselling service tailored for Muslims. They deal with various issues such as marriage, trauma, abuse, OCD, anxiety and many other issues too. Let's take a look.
للحياة إن تسل عنا فإنا لا نبالي بالطغاة نحن جند الله دوما دربنا درب الأباء كم تذاكرنا زمانا يوم كنا سعداء في كتاب الله نتلوه صباحا ومساء.
Again, welcome Safiya and Ayesha. It's great to see you both here, and it's a really important topic, isn't it? Because there seems to be something, particularly within the community, of this taboo of talking about problems. Is that one of the things that maybe inspired you to be involved?
It did, definitely. When I initially set up Sakoon in 2006, I noticed that there wasn't a professional counselling service catered for the Muslim community. And this is when I realised, when I was just applying mainstream models at that time, I was approached by Muslim women, and I realised that that approach just wasn't sufficient enough. And I was always taught that you had to separate religion from faith, and that was very much a secularistic perspective. And when I was working with clients, they would bring in culture, they would bring in their faith, they would bring their spirituality, which was really a key part of their life, and it was something that they needed in the therapeutic relationship. So after a lot of research, I devised my own model called the Sakoon model, and that's when I decided to set up Sakoon. And alhamdulillah, to date, we now have over 10 therapists. We have offices all over the UK, and we work with clients worldwide.
And it's interesting you talk about the way that, faith and, sort of therapies and counselling, of course they're intertwined, because you're talking about people's mindsets, you're talking about the way people think and their culture and what they're going to be experiencing at home. And when you joined and you were looking to start counselling, did you feel there was that gap as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Aisha said, I think maybe less so now, but there definitely has been a big gap, as far as the Muslim community is concerned, and there's still, that sort of stigma and taboo kind of associated with sort of seeking counselling, which I think is breaking down now over time. So.
I mean, it's obviously going to be much better being able to go for counselling with somebody who has the same mindset, who has the same faith and the same sort of belief system. Do you feel that those taboos are still very much there and we still need to work a lot harder at breaking down those taboos, or are you making real headway?
So at Sakoon, we do a lot of work within the community. So I deliver education on mental health, I go to ISOCs, I go to schools, I go to community organisations, masjids, charities. Most importantly, we've actually just worked with imams and chaplains at their annual conference, and they provided really positive feedback, and they actually want us to continue delivering training. So there has been a shift in terms of attitudes towards this sort of notion of, when you think about mental health, over 10 years ago, it was this negativity it was associated with. You're crazy, or it might be that that you've got issues related to jinn possession or black magic. So it's very much a very negative association. However, as time has gone by, there's been a lot of education and awareness that the government have really put in, as well as ourselves at Sakoon. We're talking a lot about mental health. We're getting people to recognise the need, and it's important to address these issues, and people are coming on board.
Now, I noticed in the clip there you were talking a lot about men and women, which is quite interesting, because for men there's almost more of a taboo. Men are reluctant to seek help at the best of times, but when it comes to mental health, that's often an even bigger problem, isn't it?
So there is research that shows that women are more likely to seek support on the onset, whereas men are more likely to seek support right at the end when they can't handle it. And that's when you tend to see a lot of suicidal rates that tend to take place with men compared to women. When it comes to the Muslim community, however, I have actually seen the shift take place. So initially, we used to have women contacting us, and there was this struggle with men, with their pride, with their reputation, their status, that it was not acceptable for them to come and talk about their problems. Now, however, majority of our clients, the most common client that we have is GPs. So they do come to us. We get men who contact us more so about their relationships and their marital issues. So they're actually starting to make that first step, which is great, and it's really nice to see that change taking place.
And it's interesting, I'm sure for you, Sophia, when you're in your training, that becomes a very important part of helping people, cross cultures, to help people understand, maybe especially people who are less familiar with different cultures. And, for women particularly, the fact that they can talk to another woman, they can talk to someone who understands where they're coming from. Is this the sort of thing that you're encountering a lot?
Yes, and that was actually one of the reasons why I chose Sakoon to do my training with them, because you're studying the mainstream kind of counselling models, but from an Islamic perspective with Sakoon. So it really, I think, with the Muslim community, sometimes when I go to a mainstream counsellor, there's that kind of barrier there, because the counsellor might not understand their culture, their faith, the spiritual aspect. Whereas at Sakoon, we're learning to kind of deliver a mainstream model, but with, taking into account their culture and their faith, and and people are more able to relate to you that way as a counsellor, and you're able to be more empathic with them.
And it's quite interesting when you look at the perspective from people who are not from your community, who obviously can also learn a huge amount, you know, because there will be people who will encounter people from the Muslim community who don't understand things. And I know that you go to many conferences and deliver keynotes, don't you, to help healthcare professionals understand mental health within the Islamic community.
Yes, I do. So I do get approached by non-Muslim organisations such as SANS and Mind, who want to know how can we tap into the community, the Muslim community. Recently, I don't know if you're aware, Alistair, of the Global Mental Health Summit. It's an international conference where they want to talk about mental health and culture change. And I was the only Muslim panellist at the event, so it was very well received in terms of talking about the difference and talking about faith and how can we incorporate that within the mental health field, recognising the work that we're doing from a community-based level, but what needs to happen from a policy level as well. And as well as looking at it from a client and a counsellor perspective in terms of what we need to provide for clients, it's also about looking at what health professionals need to also incorporate in their training models. And this is why we wanted to set up the accredited counselling courses where it's holistic. So the future generation of therapists will be able to work holistically. So it's not this notion of one approach fits all, but recognising that difference, recognising culture and spirituality and how to incorporate that into the work is essential going forward.
And it's quite interesting the fact that you mentioned you've got now 10 different therapists, you know, working across the board, and Sophia, one of the, or will be one of the newest qualified therapists fairly soon. For you, when you're actually undergoing the training, what were some of the surprises? What were some of the things that maybe you didn't realise that was a part of the counselling that may not have been something you thought of initially?
I think one of the things that we do a lot on the course is to look at our own kind of our own beliefs and our own kind of unconscious prejudices that we might have ourselves. And I think I discovered a lot about myself through some of those exercises that we did. You know, and so you know, I think the thing that I found most surprising is actually how much I learned about myself. And it's made me a lot more self-aware, and that's very important as a counsellor as well, to be aware of your own kind of, you know, your own beliefs and your own,
Because I can imagine you're challenged quite often on that when you hear somebody talking about it, and you think to yourself what you're going through, and actually it can be quite challenging. Tell us a little bit about the course, how long the course lasts, what's actually involved, how long before you actually start working with somebody who's come for counselling.
Right, so I started with my level 2, which is kind of the entry level, with Sakoon, and then I did my level 3 there as well. What I found with the level 2 and 3 is that with Sakoon, you know, I gained so much more than I expected from the course. You know, it really helps you to kind of understand how you know, how to kind of help people through, you know, through the skills that you learn on the course. You know, skills like empathy, you know, skills like you know, UPR, unconditional positive regard.
And you know, there's so many different aspects of mental health that you deal with. We list a few, and we saw some in the VT there. I mean, there's a huge array of things that you cover. Where do you start with all of them? And actually, for that matter, are there any new areas of counselling that you're considering bringing in?
So the courses that we offer, it's an accredited course, so it's recognised by a governing body. It's a course that can be used worldwide. And the title we use is that it's a title that all of our counsellors can take. They can go into any organisation, they can practice as a therapist, but we also incorporate how to apply faith and how to apply culture. And we're always we're really eager. We want to know what is the latest research. Recently I've done some training on neuroscience, and I deliver that to different organisations. We do want to also add onto our courses CPDs as well. So it's not just the accredited courses that they're going to have, but they're also going to know specifically how to deal with specific mental health issues, what is the latest research and developments, and how to incorporate that into their work. A lot of counsellors who do start, they always ask, how do I incorporate faith into being a counsellor, and how do I deal with issues like homosexuality or things that go against my belief? And this is where Sophia was talking about these ideas of my own beliefs and my own prejudices. How do I, and this is what it's so key. It's really about looking at yourself before you start working with that client, and having that neutrality, that empathy, and not allowing our own biases to overtake in the therapeutic relationship. So we explore all of these things, and it's not the typical course where you just learn something and then you take it away. It's a course where it's about you learn, but it's also a developmental of yourself. So you really gain something. It's also to some extent a bit like therapy as well. You can take some things away, you can enhance on yourself.
Well, you mentioned that, Sophia, didn't you? That actually it was therapeutic for you as well as learning new skills. And you talked there a little bit about how you're helping GPs and health professionals in the UK understand the Muslim community. When you've got into this, and when you started looking at the differences and the different health issues when it comes to mental health between Muslims and non-Muslims, what are the kind of differences that you're noticing that you're having to deal with, maybe which is very different to the mainstream health professionals?
My supervisor always says to me, your clients are so complex. I don't know how you work with all these complexities. And the reality is that with the Western counselling approaches, or people from that community, it's very much an individualistic perspective. It's very much just about that client, and it's about the idea of it's all about the client, it's about their freedom of choice, how they want to live their life. When it comes to Muslims and Eastern cultures, it's very much a collective perspective. So their approach is not so much about themselves. They've got this whole system of they've got to also think about their family. And a lot of clients have this view of the family come first and then their views come after. So we're having to bridge that gap. How can we create that way of being that will be therapeutic for them? If you give them an individualistic perspective of saying just do what you like regardless of what your family want, it's not going to work for them.
And these are fundamental differences between cultures, aren't they?
It's the values, their belief system, or their attitudes, all of this is incorporated in the room, and you've got to hold it really sensitively as well.
And when you go abroad, are you taking some of what we would consider in the UK as mainstream ideas? Are you taking them to, I know you were recently in Dubai and in Thailand,
Yes.
Are you taking those ideas there, or are you taking the things that you've learned about the Muslim community in the UK there, or a bit of both?
It's a combination of the two. So it very much depends on the culture of Dubai and the culture of Thailand. So at Thailand, I was delivering training for one of the largest wellbeing resorts. And with the wellbeing advisors, they wanted to understand counselling, mental health issues, but also in particular how to work with difference. And again, with the training, like with Sophia, it was about looking at their own culture. And with Thailand, they have this culture of being very respectful and humble, and this idea of we don't talk back if someone says something. So we were talking about that and how would they deal with a client who was different to their culture. And it was really eye-opening for them. And hopefully that will give them a very rich qualitative service when they're working with diverse communities. And that's what we want to do at Sakoon, is provide organisations training where they can work with different communities at the level that is right for them. So
and we can all learn from each other so much, can't we? From looking at, the Thai culture is very different to the Dubai culture, to the culture in Pakistan, or whichever country that you actually come from. And coming back to you, Sophia, and looking at the future, first of all, how long before you are fully qualified and become a counsellor? And then what do you hope to achieve with your career as a counsellor?
So it's roughly another 2 years before I complete the course and qualify. And I think what I want to achieve is just to, just to help as many sort of people within the community, who are suffering from, the problems, that you mentioned, and to, inshallah, raise awareness, like Ayesha and Sakoon are doing so well at the moment, of the service that's out there, that they can access, the counselling services, that are available for them, to encourage more people to kind of seek help. when they
And that's
need
the
it.
real key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because so often, you know, people are in desperate circumstances and they sometimes don't know where to turn. And obviously, if you get in touch with us here at the Islam Channel, we'll give you all the links and all the contacts so you can actually get hold of Sakoon, so you can find out more about that. But how are you doing in terms of GPs and the mainstream health practitioners who people might go to first of all? How are you doing with them in terms of raising the profile of the fact that Sakoon exists?
So we do actually have a number of GPs who are aware of our services, so they do refer their patients to us. And we also have clients who will contact their GPs saying that they don't want to have a mainstream therapist, they want to have a Muslim therapist, someone who understands their culture. Within the NH system at the moment, it's very difficult to get into, one, due to the resources and the funding, and it's very much based on each surgery. So we do some outreach work and we contact them, getting our services to be aware. We do get a lot of people who refer us as well and talk about us and share with each other about there's different organisations that's out there. So that's how they get in contact with us. I am also part of another organisation called Beamer, and they're GPs who are all Muslims who get together, and all their healthcare professionals where we can work together to address these particular issues, how to integrate our work and work with communities. So recently I did a talk on mental health and Hajj. So we always talk about the physical health of when it comes to Hajj, but we don't necessarily talk about the emotional and psychological well-being. So this is, and this was one of its kind, and it was very well received that people recognized the idea of anxiety. People do go through anxiety. Sometimes we have this idealistic notion of a Hajj is going to be amazing when you actually go through it, it's a struggle.
Well, it's a huge undertaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
And hearing all of this, you know, hopefully we are getting that word out there so people do know
Yes.
about Sakoon, and they do know about the work that you do. And we'll keep on spreading that word. But we're going to go to a quick break now, but we will come back and we will talk more about that. For the moment, Sophia, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. We're bringing somebody else in for the second half, but thank you so much. And good luck for the next 2 years with your counselling. I hope it goes really well.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to seeing you then. And again, it is time for a short break now. And as I said, we'd like to thank Sophia Khan for joining us for this part of the programme and for sharing her journey and experiences with us. And as we say, we hope she will be very soon qualified and helping many people in her area. Now, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems or have any health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your doctor or GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Health Show, where our topic today is on counselling. For this part of the programme, we'd like to welcome Shakira Akinwali. She is a creative designer, analyst and project manager. She's passionate about humanity, climate change, as well as women's struggles. Shakira is currently studying a master's in sustainable building design whilst working part-time. She's also continuing her counselling studies to help bring health and well-being dimensions to her sustainable designs. Shakira, thank you very much indeed for coming. You're a pretty busy person.
I am indeed.
A lot going on, but really interested to hear more about the counselling and your impressions on that. Really, really interesting. And we were talking just before the break about the effect of mental health and how it affects different communities. And we talked a little bit about the differences between the Muslim community and maybe other communities.
Yeah.
But mental health seems to be one of those topics that everyone is talking about. You know, we heard, you know, from Prince William, Prince Harry, and many other prominent people that mental health is an issue. And they're now coming out and talking about it.
Yeah.
How helpful is that within the cause that you're promoting?
I think it's brilliant. So when I was at the summit, the event actually kicked off at the House of Commons, and the Vice President of the White House was present. And this whole summit is really about how can we get people to look at mental health just like the way we look at physical health. Can we get the two to have the same sort of attitudes towards them, so people feel comfortable to say that they've gone to a GP if they've had a physical issue, but people still feel a bit uncomfortable to say, I went to see a therapist, or I've got a mental health issue, or I'm dealing with depression. So there's still that stigma attached.
And it's often about language, isn't it? Which is a real key point. And coming to you, Shakira, tell us a little bit about how you found out about Sakoon, how you got involved, and a little bit about your journey.
Well, I actually shopped around a bit. I was in a marital situation and required basically some Islamic counselling. So I literally did a Google search and tried to find an Islamic counsellor. And I would say I shopped around quite a bit until I found Sakoon. And initially, unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually take up the services during my marriage. But I would say immediately afterwards, I straight away called them up and started right from there. And I haven't looked back since then, I would say.
And it's amazing that actually that is even possible these days, because maybe scroll back 5-10 years ago, if you'd have done a Google search on Islamic counselling, you might not have found anything. So it was great that you were able to actually find them. And actually it's quite interesting, without delving in too deep, it's really interesting that you found it was difficult to contact them while you were still in the situation. But that's a real key, isn't it, for many people, that to encourage them that actually when they're in the thick of the problem, if you like, that they are able to approach someone and seek help.
I might add to that actually, because at the time I was affiliated with a particular community mosque, and it's not to say that they didn't have counsellors there, but I actually felt that the service there was inadequate actually, and it either only took on board the sort of Islamic aspects, which again, as Ayesha mentioned earlier, was more of a sort of community priority as opposed to looking at the individuals that are involved. And if I'm honest, it was just very inadequate. It didn't cover everything holistically enough, and it pushed me towards looking at other avenues, and that's how I ended up at Sakoon.
And that's fascinating, because for many people within the Muslim community, the mosque is going to be their very first port of call, as it were, isn't it? Where they're going to think that's a natural place to go. And you're doing quite a lot of work with mosques, aren't you, to hopefully make sure that the help that they're offering is more effective than the help that Shakira got.
And what you've got to remember is that with imams, they have their expertise in providing the Islamic perspective, but when it comes to psychological issues, they're not very well equipped in regards to knowing how to apply that into their role. And this is where we've actually had 2 imams coming onto our accredited counselling course after I delivered the training at the Imam and Chaplains annual conference. So there is a shift in attitudes and recognising that when someone comes and approaches them at the mosque or in the community, that they can't just give a perspective of this is what the Quran says and this is what you've got to do, or if you go through depression, just read the Quran. It's a lot more complex, and this is
that a challenge that sometimes mosques have, is that they they approach the situation from too much of a faith perspective, and maybe there isn't more of a holistic view because of where they're standing, if you like. I mean, Shakira, for you, was that part of the issue, or was there something else?
I think part of the issue is actually believing that they are qualified in that regard. So if I feel that I already understand counselling, then I'm not going to learn about counselling and then apply it. So you have a lot of scenarios where you have imams who are, they're experts in their own rights, but in a particular field, but they haven't learned enough of the other thing to bring it together. So I would say a lot of it comes from, unfortunately, I would say a sense of sort of arrogance sometimes as well, in the sense that they already believe that they know what is right and what is true, so they're not looking anywhere else to learn anything that will actually add to it and make their service better.
Is part of your mission then, Ayesha, to help broaden their perspective so they see a bigger picture? But I'm guessing that's possibly a little bit delicate. You've got, you were talking there about, the different personalities that you're involved with there in mosques, and is it a little bit, you've got to tread very carefully?
So far, we've had a really open, receptive response from imams and chaplains, very eager to wanting to know how to incorporate that into their role. So from my experience, I've noticed a shift, but there are still some imams, like Shakira has mentioned, where they feel that they are the expert and that this is the only view and the one approach fits all. And we live in an era now where it's about postmodernistic views. It's about recognizing that we all have different constructs, we have different meanings. The language that we use all has an impact on the way we connect and can formulate that relationship for someone to feel safe and to feel that they can trust them in order to receive that service as well. So all of these factors are necessary, which sometimes imams don't put that much importance on. But just to give you some good news, we are actually working with sheikhs in Saudi Arabia where we want to actually tackle mental health in their communities. So we're looking at educating them and delivering counselling services there. So there is definitely a notion of shift taking place.
That's phenomenal news, especially considering, you know, with Saudi Arabia being in the news at the moment, to hear of this more sort of open perspective is great. Now, I'd like to come back to you, Shakira, and talk a little bit more about your journey, because for some people who might be watching right now thinking, I'm about to pick up the phone to Sakoon, I'm going to get help, but what's it going to be like? You know, what's the process? So maybe without going into too much detail of your situation, talk us through the process when you first got in contact with Sakoon. What happened? How did it progress?
I got in contact first via email. I think right from the get-go, I felt very safe and welcome. I didn't feel like I had to be censored in anything that I was saying. So I think that already was a great thing. So even though I had no expectations, I wasn't too sure what I was even supposed to say. So I would say from that beginning part, and then I was assigned a counsellor. Luckily, actually, I was assigned Sister Ayesha here. And again, it's one of those things where, because I've been through counselling, I'm a big advocate for it, so I speak about it a lot. I tell people that I'm in counselling, I don't hide it at all. I probably speak about it a lot more than I do about, for instance, things like the GP. And that is just because people need to know that it is okay to feel the things that you're feeling, and it is okay to get help. And sometimes I think people have a lot of expectations, and they think counsellors only, you know, you only sit in a room with a counsellor and you pay them to sort of tell them your problems, but they don't solve anything. I think that, again, is a perspective sort of seen from TV, and you don't really know what you're going to get until you actually go there. So I would definitely recommend Sakoon to anyone, and anyone who's actually even just unsure, just have a conversation. Even just from that first conversation, you will be surprised at what you actually get out from that.
And how different are the outcomes that people are looking for when they come to you? You know, it is interesting that there is this perspective that counsellors, you know, you lie on the bed and you tell all your problems and go away, and in theory, you know, everything's fine.
Sure.
But actually, some people will have a different view of what they want out of a session. So how varied is your approach according to the individual?
So we provide a holistic service, so we don't have one approach that fits all. And within the assessment session, we do find out what the key issues and concerns are for the client, and specifically what it is that they're looking for from the counselling sessions. And by the end of that session, we can be able to provide the sense of what we can do in terms of working together. So that way I have an understanding, the client has an understanding of what our work's going to look like. And through that agreement, we can then start that process. So it's very much not the idea of an expert in the room. It's this sort of neutral position where we're both working together and we're guiding each other to and helping in the journey that they're going through.
And how often will you wind up talking to your counsellor, and over what period of time are we talking about?
Well, when I first started, I started with weekly sessions. After that, it spread out to about 2 weekly, and after that, it was about a month. So at the beginning, that was when I would say I was the most, I felt I needed it the most. So having that sort of consistent engagement with Ayesha was so helpful, because it helped me, I guess, get out of my own head, which is probably one of the most vital parts, I would say, for me. When we started moving to monthly sessions, there was more, let's say, homework. So even by that time, I'd actually started the level 2 course. Again, I started the course actually with them because I thought the counselling was so great. And again, I wanted something that I would be able to give back to my own community, because I've seen that quite lacking. But through the course of the counselling as well, I was able to, not only was I being counselled, but I was able to counsel, like the effects ripple outwards. So even like my family, my brothers, my mum, I'm able to then pass on what I'm actually learning or what's affecting me in a positive way onto my family without even realising a lot of the time.
And that's what you really want, isn't it? You want
Exactly.
advocates out there being ambassadors for Sakoon, spreading that word of positivity and how it can help. And what an amazing impact that can make maybe to your community. How many more people now know of what Sakoon does, or more importantly, the fact that there is specific help for people within the Muslim community, you know, out there. What's been the reaction when you've talked to people? Again, you know, you said you're sort of, you know, loud and proud, as it were, about having counselling, but that's, you know, you're against the flow of normal opinion within your community. So, how was the reaction initially?
To be quite honest, I'm probably known as somewhat of a bit of a rebel to an extent. I tend to be the person where if everyone's going that way, I'm thinking what's going on over there, and I want to look at it. So for me, I'd say the reaction has been quite positive in a sense that I'm finding people approaching me more that actually have a bit more interest in counselling, that were either too scared or weren't quite sure about it. And sometimes it just takes someone to an extent showing that actually, do you know what, this is what it is. There's nothing much to it, and actually you get huge benefits from it. Then they feel less worried about it, or less worried about what other people will think about it. And I think a lot of the time that's the big problem. It's people worrying about what other people will think. And at the end of the day, the whole benefit starts with you. And yeah, that's what I've been able to kind of basically.
And at the end of the
portray.
day, if you can get other members of your family and community being a little bit more open about it, you're not necessarily going to turn them to be advocates overnight, but just the fact that you've broken that taboo and having those conversations is massive, isn't it?
Huge.
Definitely. I would say that is definitely massive. Also, just when you go to counselling and you speak about these things, and you speak about it like it's water, like, you know, like it's food. It's not something that you're whispering about or speaking about only at certain times. Then it becomes normal, and then it isn't a problem. And also to counter that, so those are just the words, let's say, the actions now come in. So my mum's sort of seen, you know, the physical changes in me. We talk about, you know, mental health and physical. They're not actually separate. I've had physical help from Ayesha through my mental health, through my counselling. So when they see these changes, they're intrigued by it, and they want to know, how has this come about? And even just from speaking about how something has helped me, I'm now actually able to, you know, to spread on that message. So yeah, I hope I answered it.
And I guess it comes back down to how Shakira's sharing her lived experience. And this is the key, is that community have this notion or this taboo towards counselling or talking about mental health. And Shakira, mashallah, she's talking about her lived experience, and she's shifting that attitude and that change within the community, within her family, and they're seeing that. And this is what we need more of.
And no one can underestimate the power of that, because when you look at, you know, terms like cancer, it was the C word, you know, nobody would talk about it. And it's almost like there's that same sort of revolution taking place with mental health as well. Do you feel that within your communities? That we really are making that much of an inroad into it?
I can see the shift taking place, most definitely. I work within the communities, and we're becoming approached by so many different organisations, lots of different events. Can you please come? Can you talk about mental health? I'm now being approached by Islamic Help, Islamic Relief, and they've also asked me to come to their conference. So there's a huge shift in the way they used to perceive mental health and how they recognise the necessary reason of why we need to talk about it, and normalising it. And it's about recognising that it is something that exists. We all live with mental health issues. It's not just one person. We all experience it. And this is where we need to know, how can we support each other? 80% of our activities is based on mental activity. So we have emails, we're always on technology, we're having to do routines, we're always using our brain, not physical health. But when it comes to going to a GP and talking about a physical injury, it's fine. But to talk about, your brain sometimes gets stretched, you overused your capacity. So it's them situations of, I don't know how I feel about talking about this to my manager, or to talk about this.
Well, that's
to
one of
my
the things I want to
partner.
talk about, actually, because we often hear of many sort of conditions. We hear this term about the spectrum. You know, that people can have severe symptoms to very mild symptoms. When you talk about dyslexia, for example, you know, we're more familiar today with it's not just a switch. You either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
So when it comes to mental health, where people think maybe that they've got a slight issue, they're not really sure whether they've got an issue. You know, for you, Shakira, it was really obvious you needed help. What would you say to people who just aren't sure whether they actually need help, or whether they're just having a bad day, or whether they're just feeling a little bit of stress and a bit of pressure that we all feel in our day-to-day lives? At what point does it become an issue where you need help for?
So from my perspective...
Well, both of you, it would be interesting, yeah.
From my perspective, it's about recognising that when you're living your life, it can be functional, but when there's certain situations that happen, for example, bereavement, it's absolutely normal to feel sad, to feel having some symptoms of depression and feeling like you've lost that lack of interest. So that's where the spectrum comes in. However, if you feel that you can't lift yourself back up again and you're not able to readjust and adapt into your work environment with your family, then that's when it's almost like an alarm bell. Okay, I need to do something about it. So this is where it's about recognizing in certain situations it's normal to go through difficult issues and your mental well-being can be affected. And then there's also the situation where you've got to recognize, is it now starting to impact on my day-to-day lifestyle or my personality or my well-being? And this is where, when we talk about education, this is where people can also recognize the symptoms of mental health. So maybe their friend is a little bit more isolated than usual or becoming a little bit more irritable. There can be certain signs that they can recognize, okay, maybe we need to see what we can do about that.
And have you seen that, Shakira, where maybe having been through the journey that you've been on, that actually you've seen people you think, actually, you know, you think you're coping, but I think you could benefit from some help here. Have you, those sort of situations, does that sound familiar to you?
Definitely, and to kind of better answer your question, so me coming to counselling wasn't as straightforward as it might seem. I actually didn't know what I needed help with. I just felt very lost in the scenario that I was in. Just to be a bit more specific, I was in an abusive marriage and I felt that I had lost myself. Now, to kind of come back to your question, I actually don't feel that counselling is something that you go to when you need counselling. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned actually through counselling is meditation and being able to kind of like and then love myself. Now, everyone needs to be able to do that, whether you're going through a bereavement or whether you're even very happy. So to an extent, everyone can benefit from counselling. It's just to what extent, and I guess to what extent are the things happening in your life hampering your sort of day-to-day activities and the people that are around you. So I would say to some people, the counselling can be quite an internal sort of meditative thing where they're just very aware and they're using almost the same tools that a counsellor would use to counsel themselves. To other people, where it's actually having an impact on their day-to-day and the people around them and even their work life, etc., or maybe they're not eating or something that's quite, you know, obvious and visible, then definitely there's quite a lot of that going on. And to, again, further add to that, for women, it seems a lot more easier for them to kind of notice those things. And for men, and I only say this because I'm an only female in my family, I have 3 brothers, so actually me taking up counselling and learning came from a more of a perspective from actually, it was easy for me to actually get this help and go to it, and it felt a lot more normal for me than it did for, say, my brothers. So to again answer your question a bit more, I've definitely seen it, and I think it's definitely a lot more prevalent in men. And again, to use this modern switch where it's become more normal, it's now unfortunately becoming less normal for women now, and to an extent having to kind of figure things out themselves.
Well, I like the fact that you're talking here a lot about how counselling helps people to help themselves. It's a fascinating perspective, and I think we could talk about this for many hours to come, but sadly we're already out of time. But it's been great hearing your journeys and hearing more about Sakoon, so thank you very much indeed. But as I said, that is unfortunately all we've got time for. I'd like to thank our guests again so much. Ayesha Alsam, thank you very much indeed. Of course, Shakira Akinwale, and also for giving us all this great information. And you heard also also at the beginning of the show from Sophia Khan, who was in that first part of the programme. And once again, we must stress that should you suffer from any medical problems or health concerns, it's always highly recommended that you contact your GP, as the Health Show gives you an alternative viewpoint to the health concern being discussed. Now, if you'd like to find out more about any of the topics we've been talking about today, if you'd like to get in contact with Sakoon or anything throughout the series, then please do email us at healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Again, that's healthshow@islamchannel.tv. Thank you again so much for watching. See you again next week. Goodbye for now. Assalamu alaikum.